What's up everybody, Greg here with Lensprotogo and Lens Rentals, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to set up your wireless lavalier mics with either a mirrorless or DSLR camera like the A7R III right here, or a Canon C100 with XLR inputs, and I'm going to be showing you all of the settings to get really good levels and good sounding audio. If you want to jump ahead to where I talk about the XLR camera, I'm going to throw a time code right up here so you can skip ahead, because we're going to start off with the DSLR and mirrorless camera. So the first thing that you want to do is grab your lavalier mics, and you want to make sure that they're paired up. I'm not going to go through that in this video because it can be different depending on which lavs you have. But we're going to go and boot both of these on, and then you want to go ahead and identify which one is the transmitter and which one is the receiver. Usually the transmitter, the one that's coming from your talent, is going to have a mute switch on it just like this Sennheiser G4 does, and the transmitter is not going to have that, but it might have some other displays on there. So once we've identified which one is the receiver, we're going to go ahead and grab our microphone, our lavalier mic. We're just going to clip this right onto our own shirt. This way we can test audio in a general position of where it's going to be. And then we're just going to take the other end and plug that directly into our transmitter. And right away you should start to see some levels on your LCD display if your lav has one. If we jump over to the receiver, we should also start to see some of those levels. As you can see right here, that means signal is being transmitted from the receiver to the transmitter. Now before I take these and plug them into the camera and start looking at camera settings, there's a couple settings on these lavs that you're going to want to be aware of. If we open them up and go into the menu, on the receiver, at least on the G3s, we have this sensitivity menu. And what this does is basically give a boost or a pad depending if we need to send more signal out or lower the volume of the signal if it's coming in too hot into our transmitter. So this one is called sensitivity, and we can go up all the way to 0 dB or we can go down to -60 dB. But again, this is going to change depending on which lavs you're going to be looking at, and I have another pair that I'm going to show you in a second. So we'll just leave this at the default, which is -30. Going over onto the transmitter, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to open up the menu, and then we're going to navigate to what is called AF out in this case. But again, this is a pad or a boost depending on what you need to do, if you need to amplify the signal or if you need to pad the signal and lower it down heading out into your camera if your camera can't adjust for it enough and it can't handle the preamps. In here you can go up to +12 or you can go all the way down to -30. We'll just leave this at 0, which is the default, and we'll adjust those later on if we need to, but just be aware that they're there. With the Sennheiser G3 series, all of those settings are done inside the menus, but with some of the other lavs out there like the Rodelink Filmmaker Kit, they're actual physical switches. Now on the transmitter, you only get 3 options. You get a 0, a +10 dB, or a +20 dB, so you can only boost the signal out of the transmitter. There's no option to bring it down. And on the receiver, it's the exact opposite, so you only get the option to pad the signal going 0, -10, or -20 dB. So you don't get quite as much flexibility as you do with the digital systems, but it's still there if you need to adjust those levels. And most of the time, you're going to be able to fine tune them within the camera, so you don't really have to worry about it too much. So now that we have the lavs set up, they're synced together, we can see that there's a signal coming in through the microphone, going into the transmitter to the receiver. Now we need to get this signal into the camera. For this, most of these cameras, the mirrorless and DSLRs, are only going to have an 1/8" jack. As you can see right here, it's just that small sort of headphone looking jack. And this means that we're going to take the 1/8" to 1/8" cable, and this is what we're going to use to get the signal from the receiver into the camera. Now you can see that there's 2 different sides here. There's one that's a right angle and one that has a locking collar on it. The locking collar is going to go onto the lav side, so we can plug that in to the receiver, screw that down nice and tight. And then we're going to take that other end and plug that directly into our camera. Once those are both plugged in, then we can turn the camera on and go into the menus. You're going to want to look for the audio menu. In the case of the A7R III, it's in the second menu. And we're going to go down, make sure that audio recording is turned on, and then you're going to go to your recording level. Sometimes you'll have the option to do auto or manual. I prefer to do manual so that I can make sure that I'm getting the audio levels exactly where I want to, depending if somebody's talking or if we have a quieter scene. Now on the screen we have some audio levels, which is going to give us what the signal is that's currently coming into the camera. And as you can see, it's hitting that 0 dB and peaking with that red mark. So what we're going to want to do is lower the audio levels down, bring them down to about 11, 8, 7, 6. So that looks pretty good. Might bring it down a little bit more. You really want them to be bouncing like just over -12 dB. Just in case they get louder like this, you're not going to peak and have any of that audio clipping. You also don't want to have it too low because once you start bringing it back, then you're going to be bringing back some other sounds that you might not want to have. Now, if I wasn't able to adjust it low enough, like if I got all the way down to 1 and it was still too hot, that's when I would go into the lavs and we could adjust those settings in there to pad the volume coming out of the receiver or pad the microphone so it's not sending as much signal out. Again, if it was in the opposite direction and I had this cranked all the way up and I wasn't getting enough signal into the camera, we could go in the opposite direction and boost the signal from the microphone and boost the output from the receiver. But in this case, I do have some good levels, so I'm just gonna bring that back down to about 3 or 4, and that looks pretty good. So now that we have our levels set, I would highly recommend grabbing some headphones and listening to those audio levels if your camera has a headphone input. Now, you might be getting good levels, but if something's going on with the microphone, like the cable is a little bit janky, you could be getting some scratchy noise or some interference in there, and it's still gonna ruin your audio no matter how good the level is. So definitely monitor it before you start recording to make sure that both of the lavs are set up and you're not getting any interference. But that's really it for the DSLR. Now let's jump over and take a look at the bigger cinema camera using the XLR inputs. So I'm just gonna unplug this 1/8 inch to 1/8 inch cable, and we'll go ahead and grab our 1/8 inch to XLR. Do the same thing, plug this right into the receiver. And then you'll take that XLR and plug that right into the camera. And it doesn't really matter if you put this into channel 1 or channel 2, just remember which one you put it in because we're gonna be adjusting the settings for that on the other side. Now, flipping around and changing some of the settings, with some cameras you might have to do this internally. Some of them have physical switches like the C100. So on the top, we have our level adjustment, and this is only gonna do something if we have it in manual mode. So let's make sure to flip this over into manual mode from auto to M. Then we're gonna go and make sure that we're on mic level, not 48-volt phantom power, because these are already battery powered and they have their own signal. And it won't work online because it's not a strong enough signal. And then we're also gonna wanna make sure we switch this to external, not internal. Internal on the C100 uses these mics that are built into the handle. External uses the XLR inputs. So that's pretty much set up exactly how we need it. We'll leave this open because we're gonna have to adjust these levels, but we can turn on the camera now and we can see what the level of the signal is that's coming in. Now, if we look in the bottom right corner, you can see we have channel 1 and channel 2, and we are plugged into the channel 1 XLR input. So we want to be looking at the channel 1 level. As you can see, it's basically continually peaking as I talk. It's hitting the red right at 0, which means we're going to be clipping the audio. So we want to bring that level down, and we're just going to go up here to the dial on the top, and we're just going to slowly spin that until we get it bouncing right around -10 dB. That's gonna be a good level, and it's gonna give us enough buffer so if the person laughs or talks really loud for a second, we're not gonna clip the audio. And once we're at a good level, we can close up this to lock those settings to make sure that they're not gonna get adjusted. And that's basically it. You've set up your lav through the XLR into your camera. Now, the last thing that you wanna do is throw in some headphones and plug it into your camera and make sure to monitor that audio so you're not getting any interference, whether that's between the lavs or if it's something going on with the mic or the cable. Just make sure to really pay attention to that audio because no matter how good your levels are, if there's interference in it, it's gonna be really hard to clean up. And that's gonna wrap it up for this video. If you have any questions about setting up lavs with different cameras, make sure to let me know in the comments down below. Also, check out the links in the description for any of the gear that I talked about today. If you guys enjoy this video and wanna see more just like it, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for new videos every single week, and I'll see you in the next one.